Did you know that the original recipe for this was so world-shatteringly good that someone actually became a spy in order to steal it? I'm not kidding. So back in the 1880s, in a small village in the Loire region in France, there lived two sisters, Stephanie and Caroline Tatin. They owned and ran a restaurant and hotel called Hotel Tatin. While Caroline mostly ran the front of the hotel and welcomed customers, Stephanie was in charge of the kitchens. Now, there are a few versions of this legend. In some, Stephanie is simply clumsy, in others, she is overworked. Either way, one day she was planning on making an apple pie. She put the apples in a pan with butter and sugar and promptly forgot about them. When she came back to the stove a while later, she smelled the ingredients burning. In a panic and in desperation to save the dessert, she covered the apples in pastry dough and popped the entire thing into the oven. An alternate way the story goes is that she was making an apple tart instead, but when she was making the filling, she mistakenly poured it into the tin first before placing in the pastry dough. Now, the thing about this dessert is that it is essentially apples and caramel, and once it's removed from the heat, it cools very quickly. Not wanting to scrape the filling out or start all over again, she just put the pastry dough right on top and baked it as is. When the dessert came out of the oven, she flipped it upside down and sent it to be served out to the guests. To her surprise and delight, it was a hit. The guests loved it. In fact, they loved it so much that the dish soon became a signature of the Hotel Tatin, and people came from all over France just to try it. The two Tatin sisters met this with a lot of surprise. They had never intended to make a signature dish, especially not one that was so well known. In fact, they never published the recipe in any cookbook, and they actually never even called it Tarte Tatin. It was the French food author Maurice Edmond Celant, known by his pen name Koronsky, who wrote about the sisters and dubbed it Tarte Tatin. So now, who was the person who sent spies to find that original recipe? Well, for that, we have to talk about the restaurant Maxim's. It is located in the 8th arrondissement in Paris, and in the mid-19th century, it was considered one of the most famous restaurants in the world. According to legend, the owner, Louis Vaudable, was hunting in the area when he came across a tiny restaurant owned by two old ladies, the Tatin sisters. He tried the tarte tatin and was immediately entranced. He had to know the recipe, but when he asked the kitchen staff, they told him absolutely no. It was the secret to their success after all. Not to be turned away so easily, the young Vaudable got himself hired as a gardener. He only lasted 3 days on the job, and even that was generous considering he knew next to nothing about gardening. But it didn't matter. 3 days was more than enough time to get what he had come for. Vaudable got the famed recipe for tarte tatin and brought it to the restaurant owned by his family, Maxim's. Well, as fun as this story is, there is a high chance that it is just that, a story. You see, the Tatin sisters lived in the late 1800s and retired in 1906. Louis Vaudable was only born in 1902. While it is very possible that he did come across the restaurant during his childhood, he would have been likely at most 4 years old. Too young to remember it, and definitely way too young to be going hunting or be hired as a gardener. It is also important to note that his family bought the restaurant in 1932. 26 years after the Tatin sisters had already retired. Nonetheless, tarte tatin was on the menu at Maxim's, and that is largely attributed as the reason why it is so well known all over the world today. Nowadays, there are many variations of this dessert as well, as people experimented with different toppings such as bananas and other fruits. This is so delicious, especially with the ice cream on top. That's what makes it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what you thought about this down below. Bye!